Do you think Springfield will ever be the same? I don't think. The fact is, and I'll say it now, you have to get him the hell out. You have to get him out. I'm sorry. To get him out.
The Haitians are coming in from Haiti or wherever that little nigger country is, coming in by the hundreds of thousands. White people have had enough. They can no longer even afford to buy proper housing for themselves. Yet our government would have us spend thousands and thousands of millions of dollars on non-whites.
Can't have it. Can't have it. They've destroyed it. It's terrible. It's terrible to say, and it's...
Charlie Sadoff, great to have you on the Ken Harbaugh Show. Folks should be familiar with you by now. You're the award-winning director of Against All Enemies, which is the marquee film at the top of the masthead on the MeidasTouch network right now. But to be honest, I kind of had this film in my rearview mirror. It had an incredibly successful run, but we got other projects going on until Springfield, Ohio. And until the former president and J.D. Vance said the awful things they said, the lies they told about the hardworking Haitian immigrants of Springfield. And it was evocative of part of the story you were trying to tell in Against All Enemies. This story of racism is as old as the story of America itself. What are you hearing when you hear Trump and Vance attack the Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio?
Well, I'm hearing exactly what Louis Beam says in our film, Ken. I mean, it's not even like, it's not like, oh, you have to listen for the echo. It's like right there. And, you know, people who've seen the film might remember it. And what Louis Beam says is he calls out Haitians. He uses the N-word. He's surrounded by KKK members dressed in hoods and robes. And he talks about how Haitians are invading this country. They're taking the jobs of Americans. And the white people in America have had it. And he's using it to inflame his followers in the KKK. He's using it as an expressly evocative way to make people scared of black people in this country. And that's exactly what Vance and Trump are doing. And what I want people to hear when they hear them talking is Louis Beam.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even a dog whistle anymore. It's like a megaphone. They're not hiding the racism anymore. And some of that might be like the desperation of a flailing presidential campaign. But I think the bigger story here is that this has always been in the DNA of this party, and it's been given permission to come to the surface. And now it feels like the animating principle. I mean, race is what they seem to be running on in the last 40 days of this campaign.
Well, Ohio isn't a battleground state anymore. There's no need for them to be, this isn't a political move to try and like make people in Ohio scared of immigrants so that they'll go to the polls. This isn't them trying to win the election in Ohio. This is them trying to rally their base and shepherd forward this vision of America, which Louis Beam articulates pretty clearly in our film. He wants a white Christian run country. And it's not just Haitians and immigrants that they're going after. They're going after Jews. They're going after Mexicans. They're going after everybody who's not white and Christian. And I think it's really important for people to recognize that. I mean, I think there's some people in some of these groups who think, oh, these people, like, they're like, because it's Haitians, I don't have to worry about that. They're coming after all of us who don't fit into that group. And I hope people, as Chris Goldsmith said in the movie, are scared, because if you're scared, that motivates you.
And it's fundamentally anti-democratic. When you say they're appealing to their base, I mean, one way to parse that is, yeah, they're appealing to their base so that they can get more votes on the other side and win in a democratic system. But they have created this information ecosystem around that base that dispenses with the Democratic conceit, right? And they are going all in on winning with a minority of the popular vote by making sure that they take full advantage of the idiosyncrasies of our system, like the Electoral College, like gerrymandering, like all of the anti or undemocratic features that they now depend on. They're no longer bugs of a democratic system for the Republicans. They're a necessary feature of maintaining power.
And I think I don't know that Trump has ever heard of Louis Beam. I bet Vance has. But Trump sort of intuits this stuff, and he knows how to rile these people up. And I would venture to say that this isn't just about the election. I think this is also about post-election. If you see some of the people coming to Springfield, the neo-Nazis, some of whom were former Marines, which we talk about in the film, the appeal of some of these, as you said, they're not even dog whistles anymore, but to vets. There's a large group of people on the far, far right who are sort of being assembled in Springfield. And I think in some ways, in the way that Louis Beam was trying to assemble his sort of, his army for an attack on the United States, in some ways, I think maybe Trump is gearing up for that too, for post-election. He's gathering people who he knows will fight on his behalf. And just like we said in the film, in the same way that Stan McChrystal points out that Al Zarqawi was able to assemble these people who had different interests around their common cause, and Trump did this successfully in 2020 during the insurrection. I think he might be doing that again and rallying these sort of disparate groups around this idea of racism and anti-immigrant sentiment for his army, for whatever war he's anticipating coming up.
It's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break here because I have two favors to ask. We're off to a great start with the Ken Harbaugh Show on YouTube, but the podcast needs a little love. Please click the link below to follow, rate, and review. The success of shows like this really does depend on those ratings. And if you haven't yet followed me on Patreon, please check it out. It's free to sign up, or you can pitch in a few bucks a month. Every dollar goes back into this show and our pro-democracy efforts, including the reporting from Ukraine. Go to patreon.com/Ken Harbaugh. Thanks for the support. I think you're on to something, whether he's doing it with a coherent strategy in mind or if it's just his animal instinct at work. We know for a fact that people close to him are organizing this kind of response. The Mike Flynn's of the world are definitely strategic about marshaling these forces and getting ready to deploy them. And that's something we do not hear enough about.
And also, a lot of these groups, I don't think they necessarily care that it's Trump. They're just delighted with the fact that the president of the United States is echoing what used to be things that they only talked about in Gab and Telegram. And now he's out there talking about it in presidential debates. And then his VP is channeling it across the country. And they use that to recruit. So it's sort of this symbiotic relationship. Trump's using them and they're using Trump. And it's this sort of melting pot of horrificness that's assembling there and then being used to recruit people from around the country for various causes.
Right. With no intent of building a majority coalition. I mean, there's no illusion on the right that this kind of messaging, these kinds of dog whistles, air quotes, because they're now megaphones, there's no illusion that this is going to appeal to a broad enough swath of Americans to win a free and fair election, right? This is radicalizing the radicals, which is
I'm not sure what the strategy is electorally. Does he think I guess he must think that he's winning people over with this. We'll see if it's effective.
Well, I think initially he might have, because you saw very clearly when Vice President Harris was about to secure the nomination, they tried really hard, and Trump led this effort, to make the campaign against the vice president about race, and she didn't fall for it. She didn't take the bait. There's that. I think it's going to be taught in political science classes for decades. Her response to that question with the big sit-down interview with Dana Bash, where she just says, next question, he's up to his usual tricks. The vice president's team has been incredibly disciplined and not getting dragged down into the gutter. But I think the former president and his running mate, J.D. Vance, are now stuck with this. They're on this road. They're on this nativist, racist path. And you see it exemplified in things like the Springfield story. And even if they wanted to get off, which I don't think they do, because I just think it's who they are, they're stuck. And this is a campaign of racism. And
ironically, like the next step, it doesn't end with Haitians like I was talking about before. Trump made this comment, and I don't think it's gotten enough play, where he sort of preemptively blamed Jews if he loses the election. And that was a big thing for Louis Beam, that Jews control the government and we got to get rid of them by any means necessary.
Jews have assumed leadership of the federal government. They totally control it, and they're controlling us thusly. The government that's in Washington, D.C. today does not represent the interests of the white people. Therefore, we will replace them with people who will represent the ideals of white Western Christian civilization. How are we going to replace them? By any means.
I think it's important for people to realize, Trump is somehow playing, like running the same playbook. And as I said, I don't think he knows who Louis Beam is, but he's running the same playbook that these white nationalists have been running for years. And so it doesn't end with Haitians. It doesn't end with Jews. And I think it's really dangerous. And I go back to the film, like Chris talks about, because we interviewed Chris a few years ago. He says, I see
Chris Goldsmith, literal Nazi hunter.
Yeah, he said, this was back after the insurrection. He said, I can see the country going to a place that it's hard for me to imagine, but we're headed there. And the Republican Party is not disavowing any of this. Trump is leading the Republican Party to this completely racist, fascist state that is not even an echo. It's like a repeat of the KKK in its worst forms.
Do you think that if most Americans understood this, loaded question, you know how I feel, that they would reject it, that this really is about winning the information war? If Americans saw what we saw in the making of Against All Enemies, if they understood these dog whistles for what they were, they would reject it and Trump would lose resoundingly.
I do think that if people, as I said before, when people hear this, they imagine him using the N-word, because that's what he's doing. If they saw his people standing behind him, not wearing their khakis and their shirts, but wearing white hoods and robes, that would make a difference. And I think it's important for people to, for the media, not just us, but for the mainstream media to really contextualize this and tell people what's really happening and what this is really about. And I think people dance around it a little bit. He's not dancing around it. He sort of is. He's trying to be clever, but it's there for everyone to see. And so I do think he would still have his followers, because there's a lot of people in this country, unfortunately, who believe that and want to believe that and have that grievance. But I think the overwhelming people would say, no, that's too far for us.
Yeah. Good note to end on, because I agree with you. If Americans understand what is really happening, they're going to reject it. That's the America I believe in, the America I, fought for, and the America we want our kids to inherit. Thanks, Charlie. Let's do this again soon.
Thanks, Ken.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.